Hi, my name is Ashley Anderson, and before I start, there are probably a couple things you should know about me. First, I'm terrified of public speaking, and second, I'll tear up at some point during this speech, so be prepared. Okay, here it goes. I'm a 34-year-old medically retired police officer, and I live just outside of Vancouver, Canada, with my amazing husband Joel and our two little fur babies, Izzy and Ember. I've had Crips for going on 8 years. In those 8 years, my entire life has changed in ways I never thought possible. I've had to overcome a lot of challenges that have felt and seemed impossible to overcome. It's taken me a long, hard time and a lot of work to get to a point where I've moved out of my denial and towards a place of acceptance. Surprisingly, this speech has been a part of that healing process for me. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be a police officer. At 18, I started working as a 911 police dispatcher at the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP for short. The RCMP is our national police force in Canada, where the police officers are referred to as Mounties, and are most known for wearing scarlet jackets and riding horses. It was my dream to become one of these police officers. I achieved that goal just after my 24th birthday. I was initially stationed in a rural area of Saskatchewan, which had an extremely high crime rate. I was kept very busy, but I also loved my job, and I was starting to focus on where I wanted my career to go. A couple years in, while I was making an arrest, I was involved in a physical altercation during which I fractured my right wrist and tore my TCFF. I was told if I didn't get surgery, it would be unlikely I would ever work as a police officer again. So of course, I didn't think twice. I had to have the surgery. After surgery, I was initially placed in a large plaster splint for 3 weeks. While they were removing the splint, I was in so much pain that I became hysterical. I was lucky and thankful that my surgeon was familiar with Crips and recognized some of the signs and symptoms that I was exhibiting. I was immediately put on gabapentin, which made me confused and drowsy. I was referred to a nerve specialist, then to a pain specialist, who tried different medications and started doing regular nerve blocks in my neck. I was ultimately referred for a sympathectomy, a procedure where they burn the sympathetic nerves along my spine to prevent signals passing from my brain through the nerve and causing the pain symptoms. Initially, I had a little relief from pain, but have declined drastically since, which is apparently a common thing. During all of this, I was still working, stuck in the office, trying to work full-time hours and feel like I was still a part of the RCMP. I was getting a lot of pressure from work, and I was feeling a lot of pressure and criticism from coworkers and bosses who didn't seem to understand the pain that I was in. Thankfully, I had a lot of help from my mother-in-law and dear friend Brenda, who got me through a lot, taking me to appointments several times a week, taking care of me after surgeries. She was a great emotional support, a loving friend, and a second mom. Unfortunately, in January 2014, Brenda passed away suddenly from cancer. I had never lost somebody that I was that close to before, and I was heartbroken. Joel was even more heartbroken as he was extremely close to his mom. During this, I was also being pressured into accepting a medical discharge from the RCMP as my Crips wasn't improving, and I was told I would never work as a fully operational police officer again. In January 2015, I accepted an honorable medical discharge from the RCMP. I felt an initial relief that those pressures and stress were gone, but I had a lot of mixed feelings. It symbolized such an enormous loss for me. I had lost a career that I'd worked so hard to achieve, and I didn't know who I was without the RCMP. To cope, I did what I know how to do best, and that was to push everything down and suck it up. In September 2015, Joel and I got married in a civil ceremony in his childhood home, which also happened to be where we first met, and a place that held a lot of memories for us. Joel's grandparents were our witnesses. Joel's grandpa looked so handsome in his suit, and his grandma looked beautiful. They were dressed nicer for the occasion than we were. There were happy tears and lots of love. It was such a special day for us, and one that we'll cherish forever. Unfortunately, within a year of us getting married, both of Joel's grandparents passed away, which was another huge loss for Joel. I also had a hard time with the loss as I'd grown close with both of them over the years. I continued to push myself well beyond my limits to prove to myself and to other people that I was still the person I was before Crips. I was ashamed of my condition, I felt weak, and I didn't feel like I had any control over what was happening to my body or my emotions. I felt a lot of grief and loss and didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't control the pain, and that made me feel like a failure. It was easy for me to try and ignore it. Needless to say, for me, the denial stage lasted a long time. At this point, we'd been living in Grand Prairie for about a year, and we were both learning that the medical system wasn't able to provide me the type of care or treatments that I needed. So we packed up and moved to my childhood home where I grew up just outside of Vancouver, BC. Shortly after we moved, I was notified that I would no longer be receiving my disability payments. I had reached the 2-year mark where short-term disability becomes long-term disability, and they didn't feel that I had met the criteria, no matter how much medical evidence we provided. This started a 2-year legal battle that I was not prepared for mentally, physically, or financially. I was completely outraged and I felt like I'd been wronged, but I was also exhausted and already felt defeated. If it wasn't for Joel finding me an awesome lawyer and then pushing me and supporting me through the whole process, I don't know that I would have had the energy or the strength to fight it. During those 2 years, we found tracking devices on our vehicles, caught people following me into appointments, and caught vehicles following us regularly. I had my medical records, social media account, and personal life scrutinized for anything that could be used against me. I felt exposed, judged, and made to feel like the decisions that I had made were the wrong ones. My marriage was struggling. My family relationships were struggling. I was struggling and fighting. Fighting for treatments, fighting for my disability payments, fighting to figure out who I was anymore. All the while fighting so much pain. I'd officially hit my rock bottom and I was scared that I was going to lose everything and everyone. Thankfully, I was able to reach out for help. I found a new psychologist that I really liked, felt comfortable with, and started seeing 1 to 2 times a week. I got into a pain clinic in Vancouver where I started doing lidocaine infusions, subcutaneous lidocaine infusions, and was ultimately referred to a specialist for ketamine infusions. At the pain clinic, Joel and I also attended their mandatory 8-week Empowering You to Change Pain group therapy. I never thought I would say this about group therapy, but it definitely helped our relationship evolve and grow. Not only was I learning what being in all this pain was doing to me physically and emotionally, I was learning how much it affected so many other aspects of my life. It helped both of us to understand my pain, what it was doing to me, and how to better manage it. I also started to realize and understand how hard all of this was on Joel too, and that I wasn't the only one that CRIPS was affecting. I started to put a lot of work into therapy. I started talking about my grief and pain, and started to set healthy boundaries for myself and my relationships. My relationship with my parents had gotten to the point where no communication was a healthy boundary. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but our relationship had become toxic for me. They weren't understanding my pain, and they were judging me for how I was letting it impact my life. I felt a lack of support and understanding, and it's taken a lot of therapy and a 1.5 years of not speaking with them for me to be ready to start working on my relationship with them. We slowly started speaking again and working to mend our broken relationship. I finally started to accept the fact that I have CRIPS, and I started to open up to friends and family about what I was dealing with. Joel discovered the Disability Sailing Association of BC, where they have specifically designed Martin 16 sailboats. These sailboats are designed specifically to be accessible for all levels of ability, with the use of either a joystick or sip and puff technology. I was immediately in love. I've always loved the water, and I haven't been able to swim due to the sensitivity to hot and cold temperatures in my right arm, so finding an activity that got me out on the water was amazing for me. The Disability Sailing Association made me realize that there were still activities I could participate in and be competitive and have a blast doing. It was also an activity that Joel and I could have fun learning together. I felt free out on the water. I felt empowered and independent, and those were feelings that I hadn't felt in a really long time. In September last year, I settled out of court with my insurance company. I felt relief, and yet somehow it was still anticlimactic. I honestly thought that I would have felt better. I'd been blaming a lot of my problems on the lawsuit. However, it wasn't the source of my problems. It did cause a lot of extra stress, anxiety, and pain, but it wasn't entirely to blame. I've always believed that everything happens for a reason, so much so that it's tattooed on me. Over the last 8 years, I've wondered a lot about why this has happened to me. I don't have an answer to that. However, I've learned how incredibly strong I am. I've learned to adapt and overcome to so many different and challenging obstacles that I never thought I'd be capable of doing. I've learned to open up and be grateful for the little things. I've met some amazing medical professionals and fellow warriors that have encouraged, inspired, and helped motivate me. I've learned that I'm my own best advocate. I've learned to become more involved in my care and treatment options. I've learned to stop and listen to what my body is telling me. If something doesn't feel right, I do my research, ask questions, and educate myself before making any medical decisions. I'm slowly taking back my life. I'm relearning what I like, discovering new things, and learning how to adapt. I'm very lucky and grateful to have the unwavering love and support of my husband, Joel, who's also my primary caregiver. I know that this journey hasn't been easy for him either. I've witnessed him struggle, fight, and suffer along with me. It's not easy for loved ones to see us struggle and endure so much pain and not be able to do anything to take that pain away. Through all of it, Joel has been by my side no matter how uncomfortable or how hard it was for him, and I can't say enough about how supported and loved he makes me feel. Even though I'm still dealing with a lot of pain and going through different treatments and working through a lot in therapy, I can say I'm proud of how much I've accomplished and how much I've overcome to be where I'm at now. I'm a work in progress, and as I continue to learn and hopefully improve, I'm grateful for what I do have, and I try to stay optimistic about my future. I want to thank Cripps Forum for choosing me to share my story with you here today. I feel honored to have been able to speak in front of my fellow warriors. May the spoons forever be in your favor.